What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we are going to be doing a bunch of odds and ends to the O2R1 build. For example, we are going to be removing the upper triple tree here and either anodizing it or painting it. We will be changing our clip-ons as far as the entire clip-on itself, including the grips, which you can see over here, and we will be changing the ignition as well. We have a bunch of other things going on, like changing brake pads, taking the wheels off, and even modifying the rear section to try to fit an R6 tail. So stay tuned, we got a bunch of stuff coming. Let's move forward. Alright, so the first rule of business is we're going to be removing the upper triple tree right here. To do that, we're going to be removing the main nut here. We have two bolts down here on the sides. We also have two bolts here that will release the actual clip-ons themselves. We will then be removing all the peripherals, or the levers and whatnot, and switches from the actual clip-ons themselves. And then, once that's off, we are going to remove the actual ignition system, or ignition key itself. And then we will talk about what we're going to do as far as finishing this upper triple tree here. And then we'll be installing the new parts as you see right there. So let's go ahead and get these bolts off. Alright, so there you guys have it. Everything is off and removed. We do have some paint overspray or chips to clean up, not a big deal. There are also two bolts on each clip-on that are going to release and pull that thing right off, both of those. And here we have our upper triple tree as we spoke of. If we flip this thing upside down, you'll see that the ignition is held on by these two, they're actually bolts even though they look like rivets. And basically what happens with these, if I remember correctly, they have a head on them when they're installed, and then they are cut off, so it's not removable per se if somebody was trying to steal the bike. However, to get this off, all you have to do, well, you couldn't do this on the bike, I don't think, but when it's off the bike, is take a Dremel tool. We're going to Dremel out a flat mark on this and use a flathead screwdriver just to turn these off. We will then refinish this unit here, and these will go back on with the new ignition, so it's pretty straightforward. But let's go ahead, get those bars off, get this ignition off here. I'll show you exactly what I mean as far as doing it. We'll move forward from there. Alright guys, so typically what you'll see here is we'll use a little Dremel. Again, we'll Dremel two small straight lines in them. And all you do is usually take a screwdriver just like this here, tap it in there, and it should break loose. These ones aren't coming loose. I even just put some heat on it with a torch. It's not breaking loose, so what I'm going to be forced to do here, because we're not keeping the ignition switch anyways, I'm going to cut the brackets on the outside, or the mount, and just pull that off, and then I'll use pliers to get these off. But like I said, typically this works really well, and you can just reuse your screws with a flathead screwdriver. That's the way it worked with R6. Had no problem with other bikes, but again, for this one, it doesn't want to play. So we're going to go ahead, like I said, and cut the sides off and get this thing out. Alright guys, so it's all out, and here's what I had to do. Basically, if you look at the original ignition, I had to cut it off with a angle grinder, basically at the base of the head of the bolt right here. You can see that, clear it up, at the head of the bolt right there, so it would just slide right off. Then it came off easy. Then all I did was I stuck this in a vise, the screw part, and spun it around, and it came out. You can see that there was a ton of blue Loctite, and the Loctite was like serious Loctite. It wasn't like regular blue, so that didn't come from the factory, at least not in my experience. They're usually not difficult to get off, especially when you put heat on it, and it did nothing. So anyhow, the way we're going to fix this, obviously we didn't damage this at all, was the whole purpose of that. The new one's going to slide right on. You're going to use new bolts. I just happen to have a bulk amount of these. It's anywhere from 3/4 inch to an inch, and that will thread down. You're going to want to use an Allen key because you want it to be able to fit inside the head of, or the body of the ignition here, because you got to be able to get to it. So if you use a socket, you're not going to be able to, a socket tip, you're not going to be able to get onto that. So you want an Allen hex key head. So anyhow, we're going to go ahead and clean this thing up. I was going to anodize this as well, and again, I spoke about anodizing. I'm going to try. I've never done this before. So I'm going to try that with the rear sets. I told you guys that they were probably going to be back ordered, and they were. So I don't want to paint them if I don't have to, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is try to anodize them. I was going to do this as well, where you can see that this was aluminum at one point. I don't know how well the anodizing would stick to this, because you really have to have it perfectly clean. Like, it's crazy with anodizing from what I researched. So regardless, I got to clean up the insides of this thing with all that chunky paint. And I think I just might spray this with a textured paint to give it more of an OEM factory look. And then we'll move forward and start assembling some of the stuff. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright guys, next point of business is starting the install. So what I typically do, I like, and every bike's different, I like to originally start off with about a 1/2 inch up from the end when I'm putting in my bars into my clip-ons. And then ideally, they actually set these up so basically they are, well, they're faced up like this and going down at a slight angle. I actually do them opposite on opposite bars, so they come up just slightly on the edges. I find it more comfortable. That's what I did in the 929, and it was an excellent ride after that. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to do this, if you're following my lead, and you're going to slide this down here. Now you don't need to tighten these yet. Just slide these over there because we're going to have to put that triple tree on to know exactly where it sits before we clamp these things down. One difference between the aftermarkets and the originals had that extra bolt in the clamp up on top to bolt these from moving. The benefit of the aftermarket is I can have it at any angle I want as long as it clears that front windscreen. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get that upper triple tree clamp on, and then we'll start bolting things back together. And there we are. So the upper clamp is painted with the textured paint. It's not perfect, but it looks a lot better than the chipping green that it was. And again, we wouldn't, I don't think, be able to anodize it and make it look good enough, so we went with the paint. Anyhow, it's in. I went ahead and installed the ignition key onto it with the bolts that we spoke of. And I figured while it was sitting there, might as well hook it up. So we hooked up the 2 wires that it needed to be. And then I temporarily went ahead and threw on the front upper, because at this point we need to know how much clearance we have between the the clip-ons and the front fairing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the main forks as straight to the frame as we possibly can. I think I've done a pretty good job of that. You can kind of take a measured ruler or whatever you want and get an idea, but you'll know better once you get on the bike and you turn it and you see where it stops. Then we're temporarily going to bring these bars up. We are going to tighten down just one of the bolts temporarily, and we're going to see how far we can turn it on each side to make sure that we have clearance and we can get to a point that is basically comfortable for us to ride. So let me go ahead and get to that. Alright guys, so our next step is mounting our peripherals. Now sliding let's just say the clutch lever on first on the left hand side. And then we know that we have our controls that are coming next as far as electronic controls. Something to keep in mind though, these have a little knob that sits inserted into the original OEM clip-ons to stop that from moving. Even though this thing clamps on, this really prevents it from moving. Now what we're going to have to do is kind of get an idea where we're going to sit it, and we'll have to take a basically a marker and mark exactly where we want to drill this hole. You want to get it as close as you can at the angle you want, but don't worry, if you don't get it exactly perfect, remember these are completely adjustable and we can turn this. So if we have to turn it down or up, we can do so. The key is making sure it's positioned right where we need it. And one of the things you need to do that is make sure that the hand grip is marked exactly where it's going to sit, so you know it mounts up to it, because the lever can be moved back and forth. So first things first, we're going to mark right where the lever stops. Then we'll mark exactly where we'll know exactly where that electronics control has to go, and we can mark exactly where that hole is going to be drilled, and then we'll drill it accordingly with the right size bit. Okay, so as you've seen before, we're using our old school trick with Windex getting the grip on. So we're just going to go ahead and spray this inside the grip and slide it on, or you can spray just the clip on itself. It ain't going to hurt anything. I want to take the grip, get it over top of the edge, and we're going to slide it right forward. Now this is the right hand side, I believe, so we want this one. But that's going to go ahead and you're going to twist and twist and twist all the way until it stops. For me, it's right there, so let's go ahead and start mounting things. Alright guys, so there it is. It's marked, it's drilled, and it's ready for us to slide our piece up inside here and test fit it. Now I just did that. It fits perfect, and it locks right in. If you can see that or not, if I can even get it on camera. But it is set perfect to lock right in, and we're going to put our 2 screws in the back to hold it in. Alright guys, so this side's set and complete. Let's move to the other side. Alright guys, so on to the next side. First thing you're going to do is slide on your brake lever. Next you're going to slide on your grip, which will be your twist throttle. And then this is much like the other side where it has a divot inside there. So you're going to have to slide this on and figure out exactly where you want your divot. What I do is I basically mark the end of the grip, if you can see that with the tape. I then align the mark area where it's at, I put a line straight down, and then I get to my certain point and I make a cross mark to exactly where I want to drill. Just the same as the other side. If for some reason you're slightly off, it's okay, you can adjust this right here. So not to worry, you can turn the bars. But remember that this is the throttle, and the throttle has to be able to complete, or basically get in front of these forks right here. So keep that in mind, but that's kind of what we're angling between the forks and the front brake. So I'm going to go ahead and drill that now, and we'll get that thing on too. Alright, so grip is on nice and tight. Next part is going to be the switch. Now remember, the kill switch has the same scenario. It's got that little dot in there that we want to be able to drill in. Now this is where it gets a little bit more important to pay attention to how you drill, because there's two different things being drilled here. So when they're drilled, they're staying together. So what you really want to do is you want to make sure the angle of your wires are coming through, like I said before, are clearing the front of that fork. If they're at good position, then we can go ahead and position this where we want, mark it, and drill it. And let me get that done and show you. Alright guys, so check it out. There it is. To me, way cleaner looking and much more comfortable. So I'm excited about it, but let's go ahead and move forward. We got so much stuff to do. Alright guys, so moving forward, I went ahead and took off the rear sets. As I shared with you, I was going to order some black CNC'd aluminum rear sets, and everybody was sold out. So I did the next best thing and made everything as black as I could. And here's what I did. I did some anodizing and some painting. Initially what I did was I anodized these two pieces, these two, and those two. So 6 total. Only those 2 took, and here's the reason why. I'd say 95% of the parts that you order or that you have on a motorcycle that you see that are aluminum are anodized. Even if they're not a dyed color, they were anodized, and the reason why is that actually helps increase the rigidity and structural and basically visual properties of the actual aluminum itself. The problem that I ran into is the lye that you would typically remove the initial anodizing with wasn't very good because everybody was sold out of the good stuff. So it didn't basically take any of the anodizing off those 4 parts. It did on those. So we got those 2 black. I ended up having to paint those, which I didn't want to do, but we had no choice. And then I ordered black pegs. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw these on and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright guys, so there you are. I don't think it looks too bad. I would have preferred all black, but overall I'd say it looks pretty good. I mean, with the nice polished aluminum brake lever, I think it looks pretty nice. So let's go ahead and move forward. Alright guys, so I just installed the X-Up exhaust wires, so that'll work now. Now the next step is going to be hooking up the throttle cables, the clutch cable, and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the tank on temporarily with about a gallon of gas in it or so, just to make sure it starts and fires, and I have to make sure that oil gets sucked up to where it has to go, because I think I'll probably have to add a little bit more, but let's go ahead and get those things together. Alright guys, so it's a moment of truth. I got extra power hooked up, the battery's kind of low. Just put the tank on. I'm going to prime it a couple times. Again, I'm hoping with not having this whole front half of the wiring section hooked up that it's not going to screw it, but let's find out what it does. Well, she runs. And the gas thing's just temporarily on there, but it's running. Sounds a heck of a lot better than that straight pipe. Alright man, let's keep moving forward. Let's get this thing put together. Alright guys, so I need to go ahead and change the rear seat lock with the new one obviously. We replaced the gas tank and the ignition switch, so we have to get the matching rear key lock as well. So let's go ahead and replace that. Then I think I am going to go ahead and throw on the radiator and the cooling system, get it going. And then maybe we'll take it for a ride. I don't know if we'll put the chain on yet or not. Keep in mind, we do have to still refinish the wheels. I haven't made 100% certainty as to what I'm going to do with them yet. I have an idea. I have designs for them. So I guess we'll move to that when we get there. But let's go ahead for now and get this this key part changed. Alright guys, so now the radiator is on. I just filled it up, ran it for a second, and bled the system. Now what I need to do is I need to start addressing all this wiring. As you can see, the headlight wiring has been redone. But there's a lot of extra wiring I don't know that we need. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to try to bundle everything up as best I can to get this thing tip-top shape. So after that, again, we do have to still do something with the wheels. We also have to change the brake pads too, so we'll do that while that is off. And then I guess moving forward, after I do the wiring here, I'm probably going to pull off that tank and get it actually bolted down like it should be. That'll be ready to go. We'll start putting body panels on. Alright guys, so moving forward, the front wiring is basically done. I still gotta hook up turn signals, a few other things. Then in the back here, you can see there's, I don't even know what happened to it. So we got a piece of ABS plastic with some Velcro that is removable. We're gonna slide this in here right now. And bam, there it is, it's fixed. Let's go ahead and move forward. Alright guys, moving forward, we're moving on to the rear tail fairing. As you can see, yes, I understand that is not an R6 tail section, and I was going to put one on, and I did buy one, however, I did not, and here is the reason why. So, in doing a little bit of research, I realized that if I cut this section out here, and I cut these bars from here back off, that the R6 tail section would have slid right over top of it, and actually looked like it would have the same rake or same angle as the R1 here, and actually would have looked well, which I think that, you know, that was a lot of the people's complaints when I saw online that of other people that did it. They basically said, well, it doesn't go with the body lines. I think it could have. There was one downside to that though, and why didn't I do it? The reason I didn't do it, it left basically no support for back here. And that's obviously a problem. And why is that a problem? That means you cannot have a passenger, or they wouldn't want to at least sit on that with basically empty piece of fiberglass or ABS plastic. And for those of you that have watched my episodes before, you know that I don't typically ride with a passenger. However, I also don't typically keep my projects. That said, I would be drastically reducing the amount of people interested in this bike or purchasing this bike if I was to do so, because many people do ride with a passenger. So that was the reason that I didn't personally do that. Now, it could have been an option to buy a secondary R1 tail frame or subframe, and then back down the road to switch it back, and that is a possibility. That could potentially happen. Just at this point, I am not doing that. I wanted to get the bike together and get it running and make sure that everything is physically good with it as far as riding down the road. But what we did do, if you saw the original bodywork design, you can kind of tell the difference here because it hasn't been polished out. The white came straight down like this, and it just made the tail selection look really large and funny. I did not like it at all whatsoever. So I went ahead and painted that section there black. I'll have to get in wet sand to finish, or basically merge that in. And then we have, obviously, our tail cowl to match to go with it. So it's definitely, in my opinion, better looking. And I have the undertail to still put on as well, which was painted to match. So we're going to go ahead and move forward and keep getting these bottle panels put on. Alright guys, so I'm going to go ahead and install the front sprocket and the case saver. I'm going to go ahead and put the chain on real quick. I'm going to test ride the bike because I got to make sure everything's okay with it before I start putting all the fairings on. And at that point I can actually tighten down my shifter too, so everything will be all put together. So let's go ahead and move forward and get that thing on. Alright guys, so it's time to paint the wheels, and basically what we're going to do, you're going to start off by removing these two 12mm bolts right here on both sides. The caliper will slide up and out, easy to get off. Then you're going to remove all four, two on each side, of the bolts on this side and the other side, the hex bolts. And then you'll see this right here holding your axle in. You have a 22mm bolt on this side you'll take out, and then just take, I have a long bolt that I use, which is right here, that I use just to hammer it loose. Pull it out the other side, and our front wheel will pull right out. We've already talked about the setup on getting the backs out. Simply basically loosening up your adjusters here, pulling the rear bolt out, pulling the chain off it, and then sliding the back wheel out. And then obviously removing the brake there as well, as we're replacing the brake pads. So let's go ahead and get these things off and get them ready for paint. Alright guys, so we just painted the wheels, and I'm putting some decals on them now. The reason we painted the wheels wasn't just for aesthetics, was actually because the wheels were corroding really bad underneath the paint on top, basically in between the paint and the aluminum. And it seems like it's a normal thing for these older R1s. I don't know why, but anyways, we need to fix it. And next to powder coating, which I didn't have time for, I decided just to go ahead and spray them. But I didn't want to leave them all white with black centers, because it kind of looks like a 50s wheel or whatever. So I was going to spice it up a little bit with some decals, which actually I made on my plotter system at home. I will provide a link in the description with the download for these. You'll see those there. I did realize too, I was putting these decals on, I'm trying to get them round, it's not working. I don't know if this is a normal thing, I'm not a sign guy, but I realized you have to put slits in them, like you see here, and basically peel it off and one section at a time and work for inside out. to get those nice and round. So we're going to try that on the next one here. Anyways, I just wanted to show you these. We'll go over these in the end of the video as to what all we've done to the bike itself. So let's go ahead and move forward and get these done. Alright guys, so we're about to put the wheels on. Before we do so, we do have to change the new brake pads, and to do that, since the caliper is already free here, we're going to remove the two 12mm nuts here, and then the caliper will separate from the bracket itself. And then what we'll have to do is basically take a flathead screwdriver right here and pry this inward so we have more space for those pistons down there. They'll push inward so we have more space for the new pads. Slide the new pads in, bolt it back on, and then it's going to slide on the wheel as we slide the wheel on. So let's go ahead and put that on. Alright guys, so the back wheel's on. There's no real great way to explain how to do this. It's not easy, but it's not really hard either. You just kind of have to figure out how to do it. Basically what you really want to do is you want to get that wheel all the way in there with the chain lifted up around here. Slide the chain around the sprocket, so now your sprocket or your chain and sprocket are set up. You're going to get your main bolt, your axle bolt, coming through this front side here. And then as you're doing that, you're going to have your brake caliper loose with no pads inside there. You're going to slide it in there, and then you're just going to wiggle all the stuff in a straight line to get the axle through to tighten your nut down. And then we've already spoke about basically how to tighten it. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright guys, now it's time to put these brake pads in. All you're going to do is basically lift up your caliper here. Slide the back one in there. You're going to slide the front one in at this side, which I don't have in there yet. You're going to close down your caliper, making sure your rubber is where it's supposed to be. Slide the new bolt in there, tighten it down, pump the back brakes until you feel them tighten up, and that's it. Let's go ahead and get that done and move to the front. Alright, so the front discs are on. Now it is time to put on our new pads, which we have right here. Front pads are pretty simple, guys. All you got to do is take out these two retaining pins right here and there by my thumb, if you can see those two. This will pop out, push this pin out, and the pads slide out. And then right before you take them out, you want to take a flathead screwdriver or whatever you got, just widen this out so the new pads can slide down in there. But let's go ahead and get those pads changed out real quick before we get this wheel on. Alright guys, so there's the front wheel. Now that that's on, we've got to move forward. Alright guys, so the build is almost complete. We only have a couple things left to do. One is the wire harness. Now I told you guys a little bit ago that I was having to redo the wiring harness. I spent about 3 hours trying to figure it out. The whopping 10 or 12 wires in here have been spliced in about 50 or 60 times. It's crazy. It looks like crap, and it still doesn't work right. The high beams are stuck on 24/7. So I went ahead and bought another wire harness because I didn't want to deal with it. So we're going to be replacing that. We are also going to be adding in a gear selector, a gear indicator, sorry. And that will probably be mounted, I'm thinking right here. I'm not sure, it depends once I send the bike where I figure I decide I want it. But that's going to get installed as well, because what we'll be having to do is take off this tank to get to the main wiring harness that connects to the headlights and the gauges and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the tank off. I already took off the seat. Tank's going to have to come off, and then I might have to take off this front windscreen. I'm not sure yet. Depends on how hard it is to get to the back of the gauge cluster. But let's go ahead and start that and get that thing taken care of. Alright guys, so the tank's off, again the seat's off, and we have our front windscreen off, so we can get to this back plug here. I'm going to go ahead and pull out all this wiring, and I'm starting to run and trying to figure out where I'm going to put the digital sensor for the gear indicator. I'm thinking I'm just going to set it right here, far as up as I can, and I'm probably going to try to run it somehow or another down with the rest of the wiring and back through. And it's really simple. All you have to do is you have to find your transmission plug. It's a triangle 3-prong plug. It's really easy to find. It's sitting right over here. Unplug it, and you're going to basically splice in or plug in the two plugs from the sensor itself, or the indicator itself, and then you have two other wires. You have a green and black. This one is going to connect, from what I read, to the pickup coil or the crankshaft position sensor, which should be coming out of the side over here. It should be a 2-wire sensor coming up through here, and then we have a black and red one that is supposed to go to the brake light. So I'm going to go ahead and start running some of this wire, get some out, and then get some back in, I guess. Alright guys, so here it is installed. You'll see it mounted just underneath the gauge panel, and there's it cycling. And what I've done is I ran the wiring to match the rest of the wiring down through here, up and around. Follow my finger. Again, we have our 2 or 3-prong wire that it tied into, and then here is our crank sensor that I connected to. Now the manual says that there's a 2-pin connector, one gray, one black, and blue, which there is, but it doesn't say which of them to connect to. I don't know why, but I went with the black and blue. Hopefully that's right, because After that, we hooked up our secondary power wire going to the tail light. It said brake light. Obviously, you want switch power. You don't want it to only come on when you touch the brakes. It wouldn't make any sense. So also another flaw in the instructions there. But anyhow, hopefully that's right, because now I have to go ahead and put the airbox on and the fuel tank and everything back on so I can test this thing out with the wheel off the ground. And there's a little procedure that you have to go through to make sure that it's cycling with the correct gear. So let's go ahead and try that out. Alright guys, with everything hooked up, it's saying to go ahead and turn on the ignition. It'll cycle in reverse from 6 to 1, and then it should slowly flash L, which it is. Then it says to start the bike. It'll flash faster. Then I believe what it says is to, when it starts going slow, put it in first gear, let out the clutch. I'm running it up to 2,000 to 4,000 RPMs. And that's good. Now it's telling me to put it in second gear. Same thing, 2,000 to 4,000 RPMs. We're good. And I think ignition off. So let me go ahead and see if that worked after I take a ride. Alright guys, so actually before I rode it, I realized it was still, when I started the bike back up, it was still flashing 1, which means it didn't take. And then I realized the instructions say not to do just first and second gear, but through all 6 gears. And it'll actually ask you too. It'll say 1, and then it'll give you the U telling you that it's complete. Then it'll go to 2, and it'll give you the U telling you it's complete. And then all the way up to 6, and then it'll give you like a 0. And that's when it's complete. So I just tested it. It does work now. So let's go ahead and get this finished touches on this thing and get this thing put back together. Alright guys, here's the finished product. So, like I said before, we did a bunch of different stuff. Just to kind of recap, we did a full LED headlight swap. We did a full repaint of the front fender, changed the scheme of it. We changed the wheels and added the graphics. We did change the gas tank because it was all black with a green stripe coming up that way. We went ahead and obviously changed the back tire and the rear fender design, anodized and blackened the rear sets. We changed the rear tail section, again not to the R6, but to make the contour of the tail light look, or the tail section look more appropriate. We did the undertail on it, which is kind of tough to see. Full LED tail light. Pretty much the bike turned out pretty nice, I'd say. A lot better than I was anticipating. Yes, I know I have bunny ears on it, but I have block-off plates. I just like to use mirrors when I'm riding. But this is it, guys. It turned out fantastic. It runs just as good. I'm very impressed with the bike, and definitely the power's there for sure. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build. Please comment below. If you could, you like the video, you like the build, throw a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed already, please do that as well. And you can click the notification below if you want first shot at seeing the videos right when they come out. So, sounds good. I'll talk to you in the next build.